Okay. Hey, good morning, everybody. Am I live here? Good morning, those of you that are watching. A few things to update you and what's going on. Ron had his exploratory surgery earlier this week and uh, took several biopsies. The results are probably in by now. Uh, but really nothing definitive. Went back this week for a chest x-ray and has a meeting with the oncologist this week. Hopefully now definitive where the cancer is located and what treatment will be. But it's been a process. Trust me. Hopefully this week we'll get that resolved. And a family update: Randy and Stephanie, my daughter and son-in-law, as y'all know, are in the class. Randy's dad passed away yesterday. In Milwaukee, has had health issues for, frankly, a number of years. But Randy had made flight arrangements to go up tomorrow, and he passed away yesterday. So just wanted to let you know about that. And let's see, elections. Just two comments. I don't often advocate necessarily, but Dan Webster came in back primaries and again for the general, and Dan won. And then I really jumped on a lady from there's not even in my area, school board area, Alicia Ferrant, who is over in the Boone area, southeast, and she won in the earlier in August, and then won, which was a huge win, I think, for conservatism in the school board. Okay, the rest of it, I just pay less and less attention the older I get. Okay, I do. I'm about God and not government, though I believe God ordained government. I do. Okay, and sinful man has a way of screwing it up, and we've done that well. Okay, we got that down. So who's in control of this house or who's in control of that? I just know who's in control. And that's really all that matters in the long run. Hey, a few things to get us going. If you're a guest, I would really love to connect with you. So my email is there. Shoot me an email if you would, please, so I'll have a chance to respond and connect with you a little bit. And if you're a social media person, join us on Facebook at Journey LG. And all of these classes, I want to remind you, they're live now, and then they're uploaded to YouTube and available immediately. We have a moderate audience that watches live, but we have a large audience that watches it between Sunday afternoon and Tuesday night a lot. So hopefully you'll subscribe there and join us. And then let me remind you, it's Holy Land Trip. I've got some brochures on the countertop over here behind me, but there is the link to the brochure. And you probably within 6 weeks or so, I'll be done announcing it, because we leave 6 months thereafter in June. And then a couple of things that I wanted to draw to your attention that I think you'd be interested in. Melissa Werner. Melissa, where are you? I guess 2 or 3 years ago, somewhere in the process, I had kind of missed The Chosen, and she made us aware of that, Lynn and I, and we caught up and watched everything, and it was fabulous, I thought. Just well done according to scripture, but it's been kind of dormant because they want to raise the money to do the filming and not have any indebtedness. But season 3, the movie is in theaters starting next week. And there are a lot of theaters in the Central Florida area. But if you will go to the Chosen Tickets, you can type in your zip code, and we'll let you know the theaters near you that are showing it and when they're showing it. I know Lynn and I bought tickets for next Sunday afternoon at a theater near us. And these are the kind of events that we need to support, so they do more of them in our theaters. So I wanted to get that in front of you as well. And then next has to do with our holiday giving mission. Great start last week. I can see the stuff sticking out of the bin. So even better today. We're going to do this 2 more weeks. 2 more weeks. And I do know this, that it was picked up Sunday and it was taken to the school, and some of that which we'd already given has already been given out. The kids that are at this Title I school get breakfast and lunch at the school, but when hurricanes and storms come through and they don't have school, they don't get to eat. So they were able to make some food available to the families as well. So I want to remind you, just keep bringing it in. I didn't suggest this, but I'm going to today. If you want to purchase a gift card, I don't know, Target or Walmart or somewhere, why don't you got to trust me. Okay. I can't believe she just, okay. Kind of like, no way. Okay. All right. Okay. Okay. I'm still going to say it. Give me the gift cards. Okay. And I'm just afraid they're going to get lost in all of that down there in the bags and stuff. So if you'll give me the gift cards, I promise, no matter what she thinks, I promise that they'll get to the school. And then one other thing that honestly I missed, I don't know how I missed it. It's a few weeks out, but the church is doing something different, really an outreach to the community, kind of a Christmas festival on a Friday and a Saturday, December 16 and 17. And they need help serving. I don't think it's all evening or all day on Saturday, but they need help. And we're a big group and a big-hearted group. So if you'll just go to the church's website, I'll have a slide for you next week, but if you'll go to the church's website and just click on events and scroll down, you'll see the Christmas festival. And there's a link there that you can sign up for a time and for some responsibilities. And they need help. This is a great opportunity to minister to the community with the Christmas message. So I'll have more information on that next week, but I did want to put it in front of you. And then last, before we get into the lesson, remember next week we sinfully pig out and gluttonize ourselves. So, but we can only do that if you bring lots of food. Okay. And all texts to my wife next week are forbidden. Okay. No text. Okay. My doctor says all things in moderation, and next week I will not moderate. Okay. All right. Okay. I think that's it. Okay. Open your Bibles to Matthew chapter 5. We're in this study of the Beatitudes, really the Sermon on the Mount, and looking at these opening Beatitudes. Wonderful study. I am pretty committed after the first of the year to picking up with Matthew chapter 5, verse 17, and marching us through the rest of the Sermon on the Mount. Just so much there that builds on this foundation that we're looking at in the Beatitudes. But the big idea is we've got to not just intellectually, know and understand. We've got to embrace. We've got to buy in. We got to commit to these being keys that unlock a blessed life, a life of fulfillment and satisfaction and contentment. And though we may have some measure all of that, I truly believe that if we embrace these 8 blessings that Jesus gives to us and do our best to live out the character traits that are listed there for us, I think we position ourselves an even greater blessing from God in our lives. He loves to bless his people, but we've got to put ourselves in a blessable condition. Okay. Today we're going to look at part 6, or key number 5, the 5th beatitude. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Let me kind of give you the big picture, because it's so important to realize what Jesus is teaching here. I really believe is strongly progressive. Everything builds on what he's just said. And these opening Beatitudes, I call kind of the roots to the blessed life, where he talks about being poor in spirit and then mourning, and talks about in being meek. And that's primarily looking at the vertical relationship that you and I have with God, seeing, being aware, knowing our spiritual poverty and bankruptcy because of our fallenness and sinfulness. And then that morning being broken over that in heart and in spirit. And then becoming meek in the sense, I know that I'm bankrupt, I am broken over that, and I know that I need to put you in charge and in control. I need of my life, and submitting my will to your will. And then last week, we just kind of hit what I think is really the pivotal one. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst, who have a relentless pursuit, a relentless desire for the righteousness of God, to pursue Jesus and to his will for our lives. Jesus would add to this in the Sermon on the Mount in chapter 6, in verse 33, when he says, seek first as the most important thing that you seek in life. Seek first the kingdom of God, his rule and reign in your life, and everything else will be added to you. Everything else that we need. So you got the roots, as it were, in those opening three beatitudes, and then the way to live that life is this constant pursuit of Jesus and his will for our lives. Today we kind of turned the corner into the rest of these beatitudes, looking at what I would call the fruit of that life. And we move less from the vertical relationship with God and more to living that out horizontally. When Jesus was asked, what's our most important assignment? If you were to sum all that it means to love God and to be followers of you, what would that look like? And he made it really very simple and straightforward. To love God. To love God with everything that you are and have, heart, mind, soul, and strength. And to prove that you love God by loving others. By loving others. By loving your neighbor as yourself. And he's fixing to talk about the fruit of this life of pursuance of God and his will. And he's going to talk about the results or the fruit of that in terms of living extending mercy, especially to those who don't deserve it. Living a life of purity and integrity, no matter what it may cost you. And then being a peacemaker in all situations and circumstances. Those are kind of the three, maybe the positive fruit that comes as a result of this kind of life. And then the last one that we'll look at before we wrap up for the Christmas break will be the last three verses, Matthew verses 10 to 12, where he talks about, we got these positive fruits for you to live out, but there's also a negative side. You live that way, and you will be persecuted for my name's sake. It's going to cost you. It's not going to be easy. There's a price to pay to follow me. So that's kind of a little bit of the backdrop. But today, blessed are the merciful. Blessed are the merciful. I don't know. Maybe it was just the election and everything that went with it. But it just kind of caused me to kind of stop and I don't know, reflect on how harsh, how angry, how vitriolic, how resentful, how intolerant is the world in which you and I are living. And knowing that Satan is an arch enemy and is going to do everything that he can to counter anything that's Christian and positive for God. And I think our country, if the scales haven't tipped in his direction, they're close to tipping in that direction, unfortunately. Doesn't mean we throw in a towel and give up. Maybe our need to shake the salt shaker and to shine the light has never been greater, but also never has it been harder for us to be willing to do that. Never in my lifetime has the Christian community been more treated with disdain and disrespect. Some of that earned, unfortunately, by how we lived or how we didn't live in the eyes of the world. But things have never, ever been more difficult. But we can't shun the responsibility as followers of Christ. We are called to make a difference with our lives and to live to a different standard than everybody else. And this is one of the marks that can make one of the greatest differences. I told you a few weeks ago when we looked at the Beatitude, blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. That's as a type A, high D, control freak personality, like some of you in the room. I feel like even after all these years in my journey, that there are seasons still in my journey that God and I are in a constant battle of wills, and where I am not willing to submit my life to his reign and control, which is what the meekness is all about. And I admitted to you, this is one of my weakest. Well, it's my second weakest. Okay. Today is number one. Okay. And that is blessed are the merciful. Now, I continued to try to justify that by saying I married Miss Mercy. Okay. And this is her primary gift. All right. And I thought, some of that has rubbed off, not near enough. But looking at our children, all three of our boys got a pretty good measure of mercy. And I will obviously contribute that to my wife's side. Okay. Now, Stephanie is a whole nother story. Okay. She is unfortunately more like her unmerciful father. And Stephanie is one that I've had folks say to me, I do not want to meet your daughter in a courtroom. I said, listen, I don't even want to go to her house. So, she's rough and unmerciful. Okay. But I know that I've come a long way. A lot of that seriously has been because of Linda's example through the years, and watching the boys, over the years, really show tender-heartedness to classmates and neighbors and friends, and sometimes just total strangers. That not only did I not do anything, you can't do something if you've not seen it. And I want to think that things have progressed and things are better, but you can't meet a need you don't see. And we'll study this morning that's the first place that we need to start. So let's begin. Let me define mercy. And I think it would help us turn to the best way to do that, I think, is to illustrate it. Turn to Luke chapter 10. Turn to Luke chapter 10. Very familiar story. We went over this story back months ago when I went through the parables of Luke, and we covered this one. But I want to highlight it because in this example and two key components that are in here, we're going to really be able to get a good working definition of what mercy is. And it's more than having pity. It's more than showing simply it's that, but it's that and more. So let me pick up in Luke 10, verse 25. And behold, a lawyer, it would be a lawyer, I understand that, I have two in my family, stood up to put Jesus to the test, saying, Teacher, what shall I do to inherit eternal life? Great question. Most important question. He said, well, what's written in the law? Well, how do you read it? What does it say? And he said, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself. And he said to him, you have answered right. Do this and you will live. You will really have a full and abundant life. But he, desiring again to justify himself, and I hate live, said to Jesus, well, who's my neighbor? I mean, who is my neighbor? And Jesus replied, and we know the story. A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho. It was, 2,000-foot drop off, a very dangerous, called the Bloody Pass. Is what it was called. It was so dangerous. Jesus replied, a man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho, and he fell among robbers, who stripped him and beat him and departed, leaving him half dead. Now, by chance, a priest, one of the religious leaders who had been in Jerusalem, been at the temple, been serving, on his way back to home, was going down the road. When he saw him, he passed by on the other side. Notice he saw the man in need. So likewise, a Levite, kind of an assistant, you might say, to the priest, also been serving at the temple, also on the way home. When he came to the place, he saw him. They both saw him. And he passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, bitter enemies of the Jewish people. I'm presuming that the priest and the Levite were Jews, and they make their way to the other side of the road. But the Samaritan, who were, I guess, the results of the cohabitation when Assyria conquered the southern the kingdom and migrated Assyrians into Israel. They intermarried and had kids, and basically they were the Samaritans. They were half-breeds in the minds of the Jews, bitterly hated, by the way. And so this Samaritan, a bitter enemy, who had every reason not to help this Jew, as he journeyed, he came to where he was, and he saw him. So what's the common denominator here? All of them what? All of them saw. Everybody saw. But he had compassion. He didn't just see, he felt something. The others didn't feel this, But he did. He saw and he had compassion. And he didn't go the other side of the road. He made a beeline to him. He went to him and bound up his wounds, pouring oil and wine. Then he set him on his own beast, which means he probably had to walk, and took him to an inn. We don't know how far that was. And he took care of him, took care of him. So he saw, he had compassion, and he does something. He takes care of him. On the next day, he took out 2 denarii and gave it to the innkeeper, saying, take care of him, and whatever more you spend, when I come back by, I will repay you. Which of these 3, he asked, proved to be the neighbor? The man said, well, the man who fell among the robbers. And he said, the one who showed mercy on him. And Jesus said to him, go and do likewise. Just 2 things that are, before I define mercy. You got to see, but you have to have this compassion, care, tenderness of heart. But then there's got to be action. And that's the difference. Look at this. Mercy is a tender heart. It just sees, yeah, but it's a tender heart. And that cares and acts, moves, love and action for the good of others. Maybe an even more succinct definition, it's compassion and action. It's moving. It doesn't just see it. It feels it, and it acts to try to remedy it and do it better. Now, what's interesting here is you have an enemy doing something for people that hate them, striking. You have him being totally inconvenienced to do this, and none of us like inconvenience. Okay. And then he had to pay for the gentleman to stay at the inn. So it was inconvenience. These people I don't even like, they hate me. And it's inconvenience, and now it's costing me. But yet he shows compassion, and he acts and moves in that compassion. Mercy is giving others. We'll see this even more. Mercy is the willingness to give to others what they don't necessarily deserve. If God were only a God of justice, you and I would get what we deserve and we wouldn't like it. If God were only just a God of mercy, then we will not get what we deserve. But beyond that, not really the part of the lesson is that God is a God of grace. Not only in his mercy do we not get what we really deserve, we get to experience his grace, and we end up getting what we don't deserve. That's a pretty good equation for folks who are undeserving in life. So mercy is just that compassion, and that's in action. Second thing I want to talk about is, why is mercy, and I use the verb demanded, not expected, demanded. What are the reasons that you and I should practice this beatitude of being merciful toward others? Well, maybe the first and foremost is that you and I have all been on the receiving end of the character of God, where his mercy has been displayed in our lives. God is merciful. It describes a character. I want to take you back back in Exodus chapter 34. This is post giving of the first time the Ten Commandments, and Moses coming down off the mountain and found an entire nation in immorality and idolatry, and he pleads for God to be merciful to them, and God reappears, as it were, to Moses the second time. I want you to see how God describes himself in this passage. Exodus 34, verse 5. And the Lord descended in the cloud and stood with him there and proclaimed the name of the Lord. The Lord passed before him and proclaimed. Listen to the description. The Lord is a God merciful. And that's the first word that God chooses to reveal himself to Moses, is his mercy, and gracious. He is also a God of grace. Slow to anger. Patient with us, abounding in steadfast love and faithfulness. Now, that's an interesting verse But most people don't know that truth, that verse about the character of God is repeated 7 times in the Old Testament. In fact, it's the most repeated descriptive phrase of God in Scripture. And it begins with mercy. It's in Deuteronomy, it's in Numbers, it's repeated a number of times in the book of Psalms, and even repeated a few times in the New Testament. Whatever it is about the character of God that's important to God, and He is a God of grace, He is a God of love, He is a God that's holy. But I get the sense that the most important attribute of God that He wants us to grasp is that He is merciful. And I think the reason, maybe I'll get to this in a minute, in Hebrews, is until we are thoroughly convinced that God is a God of mercy and not condemnation and judgment, we will never run into His arms, because we will feel that He is going to judge us and perhaps even condemn us. But if we can come to the point in our journey, we're thoroughly convinced that He is a God of mercy, that it makes it easier to rush into His arms. Not because we deserve it, because we don't. Because He is a God of mercy. Let me read in Psalm 103. Listen to David as he writes these verses again. Blessed are the merciful. Bless the Lord, O my soul, and all that is within me. Bless His holy name. Bless the Lord, O my soul, and forget not all His benefits, or forget not all of His merciful acts toward us, who forgives our iniquity, who heals our diseases, who redeems your life, who crowns you with steadfast love and mercy, who satisfies you with good as long as you live, so that your youth is renewed like the eagles. Verse 8, the Lord is merciful and gracious, slow to anger, abounding in steadfast love. He will not always chide, nor will His anger keep His anger toward us forever. He does not deal with us according to our sins. For as high as the heavens are above the earth, so great is His steadfast love, His mercy toward those who fear Him. As far as the east is from the west, which is impossible chasm to breach, so far does He remove our sins from us. As a father has mercy on his children, so the Lord has mercy on those who fear Him. I wrote in the margin of that psalm, God has a long fuse, a short memory, thick skin, and a big heart. That's the very opposite of me. I have a short, I don't want to go through all that, okay, but no, it's and then Paul's perspective, when he says in Ephesians 2, 4, or 5, that God, who is rich in mercy. One of the most compelling reasons for you and I to be merciful is that the God who made salvation and forgiveness possible, that maybe His best known attribute that He wants us to grab a hold of is His mercy. But take that further. If God were going to send someone like His Son to be Him in physical flesh, what attribute might most describe Him? Jesus. And I think that would be mercy. There are about 35 recorded miracles. John tells us that's just a limited sampling of all of the miracles that Jesus did. And there were many different kinds of miracles, but they were always acts of mercy to relieve suffering. And then there were miracles that were spiritual in the sense where Jesus forgave sins, and the miracle healing was a visible proof of the forgiveness of the sins. The lame would walk, the deaf would hear, the blind would see, and so on. So Jesus' entire ministry was a ministry of extending mercy, either from a physical perspective or a spiritual perspective. It was all about mercy. So much so, I'll give you 2 examples. Peter. When Jesus at least 3 times predicted his death, Peter was the one who spoke up and said, no way, that's not going to happen. I'll see to it. And Jesus' response to him is that Satan has desired to sift you, but I prayed for you. And we know the story that when Jesus was arrested in the mock trials and that Peter ends up being confronted about his allegiance to Jesus, and 3 times he denies Jesus. And Luke tells us that he wept bitterly, broken over it. Somewhere, and we don't know where, but I've shared with you before, somewhere between the resurrection and Jesus' appearance in the upper room to his disciples who were hiding in fear, he made an appearance to Peter. He takes the initiative in his mercy to go after the one who had publicly denied him when he needed him the most, and he extends mercy. Thomas said, the other disciples said, we've seen the Lord. So Thomas said, you a bunch of liars. Okay, I'm not going to believe it until I can stick my finger in his side and in his wrist or in his hands. I'm not going to believe. And Jesus shows up, miraculously coming through into the room. Who does he look for? Thomas. What's God's normal reaction when you and I fail? Do not let the enemy convince you that it's to condemn you and to judge you. He's chasing you. He's looking for you and me with mercy. With mercy. We are merciful because God is merciful. Jesus is merciful. And honestly, you and I, when we come into a relationship with him, you and I are called, commanded to be ministers or agents of his mercy. We're called to do that. A couple of passages. One is in Hosea. In Hosea chapter 6. If you got that, you turn there. I don't have it on the screen. I probably should have, but I don't. In Hosea chapter 6. In Hosea chapter 6, verse 6. For I desire, stay with me, I desire mercy and not sacrifice. I desire mercy and not sacrifice. And then over in Micah chapter 6, verse 8. Micah chapter 6, verse 8. Here we go. He has shown you, O man, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? That you do justice, you show mercy, and you walk humbly with your God. Twice in the Old Testament. What's interesting is that Jesus makes two references to this. What is God's highest expectation of those who want to be blessed? I want mercy, stay with me, over sacrifice. Let me break that down further. Jesus says, and God says, and Jesus repeats it twice, it is more important to me that you show mercy than it is to worship. It's more important to me that you show mercy than it is to serve. I don't know that I've ever come to that conclusion. But that's what the Old Testament says about God and what Jesus repeated at least twice in his teaching ministry. As important, listen, we place worship and service way up there as evidences of righteousness and walking with God. And they are important. But is Jesus maybe not telling us that as important as they are? Extending mercy, especially those who don't deserve it, is even more important. It doesn't mean we start worshiping, doesn't mean we start serving, doesn't mean we start doing the other things, but it may mean we become more observant and compassionate and active when we have opportunity to show mercy. To show mercy. And then, reasons that mercy is demanded. Again, God is our example, Jesus too. We're called to be merciful. And I just kind of threw this in. I really think we'll all need it in the future. Mercy's extending mercy is kind of like it's a bridge that at some point we must all cross over because we're so imperfect. At some point in all of our lives, probably more than once, we're going to wish that people had extended mercy toward us. And part of what's taught in the Beatitude is, blessed are the merciful, for they shall what? You want to get it? You better be giving it if you want to get it. Now, as I have with the others, to be more practical, how can we live? How can we practice showing mercy, being merciful, practically on a regular basis? And I have jotted down 7, I'm going to say common, regular, almost daily opportunities where you and I can practice showing mercy. There's 7 of them, and they are so convicting because it means that a lot of us, including me, are not seeing it at all, much less caring and much less acting on it. And there's 7 of them, okay? Number 1, okay? One of the easiest and most practical ways to show and to practice merciful is when we meet the material or the physical needs of others. Now, I know we're doing that in this month-long project for that Title I school that we're trying to help. But it's not really very personal, is it? Those needs are all around us. In 1 John chapter 3, verse 17, John writes these words: if anyone has the world's goods, and we're all blessed in here, all of us, some more than others, yes, but we're all blessed, and sees his brother in need, that's the issue. We don't see. Yet closes his heart against him. How can God's love live in him? Little children, let us not love in word or speech only, but in deed and in truth as well. Let me slip back to the Good Samaritan for a minute. Here's what all too often we think, and definitely what the world thinks. Did the Samaritan ever mention his unhappiness and even blame on the fellow near dead on the side of the road? That's your fault. You shouldn't have ever been on that road. He never addressed the cause. He never even went after the robbers. He just took care of the hurt. Never went after it. Did he say, you know what? I really wish that I had the time and resources. Our government needs to do more. We need to do a better job of taking care of people like this. Okay? We need a greater law enforcement effort on these several miles from Jerusalem down to Jericho and pass it on to somebody else. None of that's ever mentioned in that story. It's just that he went to help. And he just helped him. Inconvenience. He just cared and he acted. Romans 12:8 says that we should be showing, this is interesting, showing mercy with cheerfulness or joy. You know why? Because most of the people who need mercy, it's been a long time since they had cheerfulness or joy. So it's not, it's like you got to see, you got to feel, you got to care, you got to do something and enjoy doing it. Show joy in doing it. That's a tremendous demand. Tremendous demand. Show mercy toward those who have physical or spiritual or material needs. Number 2, show mercy toward those who are struggling spiritually. Jude 22 says, have mercy on those who doubt. Is there anyone in your life that is spiritually struggling? Of course there is. Maybe you. We all do at times, spiritually struggling. And Jude says, listen, have mercy, be tenderhearted, not judging, not condemning, not damning. Have mercy on them and the struggles that they're going through in their spiritual journey. And we all face them. But it's easier to be judgmental than it is to be merciful. Third, this one's really up close and personal. How can I show mercy, not just in meeting material and physical needs, not just in helping people who are struggling spiritually, but showing mercy toward people who hurt you or offend you? Now, isn't that the last thing we want to do? In Luke chapter 6, in verse 35, Jesus says, but love your enemies and do them good and lend, expecting nothing in return, and your reward will be great, and you will prove yourselves to be sons of the Most High, for he is merciful to the ungrateful and the selfish. Be merciful even as your Father is merciful. Context, be merciful to your enemies. Be merciful to your enemies. Now, Peter in 1 Peter 4:8 was interesting. He said, love covers a multitude of sins. It just kind of overlooks them. It just kind of washes over them. Now, that he didn't say love covers a multitude of crimes. Okay? You do the crime, I think you need to pay the time. Okay? This is not about crime. This is about folks who have sinned against you. But sometimes our hearts become so hard and insensitive and uncaring that our hard hearts, listen, make big deals of little issues, especially in the lives of others, especially in extending mercy toward them. I've already read a couple times, I'll just mention it. Aren't we glad that God does not treat us as our sin deserves? Then why do we treat others as if their sin does matter? Remember, a couple of years ago, we spent, seemed like 12 or 13 lessons studying the life of Joseph. And we all know how Joseph, through really no fault of his own, may have some pride creep in a time or two, but not a continuous and a big issue. And yet his brothers sell him, and they lie about him, and they lie to their dad that he's dead. And he ends up, we know, becoming prime minister of Egypt. And there's a famine in Israel, and Joseph's brothers show up. And if there was ever a chance to get even, to repay, he had it. You know, I didn't think of that. I think that may be one of the most stringent tests that God puts in front of us. When someone hurts us, harms us, there's a good likelihood that somewhere down the road, we will have opportunity to get even. And maybe one of the strongest tests of our spiritual journey will be at that moment. Do we get even, or do we show mercy? That'll be a hard test. Be a really, really hard test. 4, we can show mercy by, I struggled here with what word, but it's just so, again, like the last one, by not gossiping, or slandering. Don't speak lies about people. Don't believe unproven reports. Get the facts. There's a proverb that says, it's better to steal somebody's stuff than to slander their name. He said, you're better off being a thief than to gossip or to slander another person. It's worse to steal. It's worse. It gets worse when you gossip and when you slander. And James condemned it. Peter condemned it. Don't do it. Fifth, I am again, you know me, high D type A personality, and I'm harder on me than anybody could possibly be on me. I have really, really high expectations of me. And often in my life, wrongly often in my life, do I impose those same high expectations on others. Mercy does not require unreasonable expectations of others. Just because you're like that, just because you're high D, just because you're a get it done, just because that doesn't necessarily mean everybody else is. But when they don't live up to our expectations and standards, we dismiss them, we judge them, we blame them because they're not like us. We're all, and God knows it, we're all frail and we're all fallen, all of us. And we need to be extended mercy. Two more. One of the ways, and this really, a lot of you are still in the marketplace. Some of you are tired out of it, but I'm doing a lot of work in the marketplace, and this is where this really needs to be, practiced a lot, and that is showing mercy when you're valuing relationships over rules. It'd be good in the home too. Listen, two things. When my kids were growing up, boy, if there was a rule, I had it. If there was a rule, I had it. And it seemed like every time there was a bad behavior, I made a rule. And then you got punished when you didn't obey the rule. And by the way, that's not good parenting. It's not good parenting. I know there was a season here at the church when I sat in an executive type position. And I remember, because I was part of it. Okay, when someone, usually one of the pastors, would do something that they really should not have done. I'm not talking about sin. Maybe they purchased something they didn't get approval or something like that. Then I would work with the business administrator. I'm not naming any names because I was the initiator, and we would create another policy. You ever worked at a place like that? Okay, it's one policy, one procedure after another one. Okay, and it took years for me to realize that why am I penalizing everybody else for one person's behavior? Why not have the intestinal fortitude to sit down with the guilty party and say, we're not going to do that, and here's why. But it was easier to make a policy and send it out to everybody. I remember those days, don't you? Yeah, you remember those days. Yeah, that was me. Wow. Value. We know the rules, but we need to be extending mercy. The relationship is more important than the rule. Always put love above law. Not easy, but required. And then last is a way to show mercy is to show mercy toward the lost. To show mercy toward the lost. In Jude, I was in Jude a few moments ago, and I read verse 22. Let me read verse 23. And again, I have mercy on all who have doubts. Save the unbelieving, the disbelieving. How? By snatching them out of the fire. Have mercy on them. It was interesting when you look at the ministry of Jesus, so much of his extending mercy, especially physical healings, and enough dotted in of spiritual forgiveness of sins. All of it with the intent of reaching an unbelieving audience was in the extending of mercy. It may be one of a Christian's most important tools in evangelism. When Jesus came into the city of Jerusalem just before the Passion narrative started, it says that Jesus paused and stopped, and he could see overlook the city, and it said that he wept. One of my concerns for Orlando, and I am for Orlando. Don't say that I'm not. I just need to be careful that we don't substitute ministry for weeping. And serving and giving for brokenness and crying. Why would God position us and other evangelical churches to reach a city that's increasingly lost if our main answer to that is providing them stuff and service and not a broken, compassionate heart over their spiritual condition? I don't think God is totally pleased if that becomes the result. Well, let me close. What about those? Blessed are those who are merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. We get mercy from others when we extend mercy toward them. And I'm going to add this, usually. Not always. We don't do it because we expect something in return. We do it because it's Christian. It's Christian. I put in my notes, mercy can't happen to us until it happens through us. Another thing, we literally help ourselves when we extend mercy. There's a benefit to being merciful, though that's not why we do it. And again, as I said earlier, we are most like God when we are merciful. When we are merciful. In Psalm 109. Just discovered this. Was really in Psalm 109, in the middle of a Psalm of David, looking back on his experience bad with Saul, looking back on experience bad with a fellow by the name of Shimei, and looking bad on his experience with a king named Ahithophel. In verse 14, this is what he says: "May the iniquity of the fathers be remembered before the Lord, and let not the sin of his mother be blotted out. Let them be before the Lord continually, and may his memory be cut off from the earth. For he did not remember to show mercy, but continued to pursue the poor and the needy and the brokenhearted, even to the point of death." You know what he's saying? God condemns merciless people. He condemns merciless people. And the reason is mercilessness conjures up all of the emotions of revenge, vitriol, hate, anger, blame, resentment toward the lives of others. And those are all poisonous. All poisonous. But yet when we extend mercy, we find freedom. So let me close. I want to go back to the 7 ways to practice. And I'm going to read through them one at a time. And what I want you to do is put a name with every one that applies. Somebody you know. I won't linger, but somebody you know that needs that ministry of mercy. Okay? Number 1, who do you know that you could help with a material need this week? Thanksgiving, Christmas? Who do you know? Or who might God bring across your path? 2, who could you encourage this week that is spiritually struggling? Got a name? 3, who has hurt you or offended you that you could show kindness and mercy to this week? It doesn't matter their response. We're not responsible for how they respond. We're responsible for how we respond. 4, who have I gossiped or slandered about that I need to discuss and find the truth? But sometimes we jump in on the gossip and the slander because we want to be accepted in that group, rather than going to the source and trying to find out what the facts really, really are. 5, who have I imposed unreasonable expectations upon that I should correct? Who? 6, who have I hurt by putting rules over the relationship that I should seek their forgiveness? And then last, who is an unbeliever that I could connect with and seek to influence toward Christ? That's mercy where we live. The world in which you and I live needs this. It may be our best evangelistic tool. God help us to provide it. But it's first all around us, starting there. Father, thank you for being a merciful God toward us, giving us not giving us what we deserve, but even going beyond that and giving us what we don't deserve. And you expect us to do that to those all around us. And there's resentment, bitterness, anger, unforgiveness in the room toward people that were loved as family and friends, and maybe not even remember what it was all about. Maybe they do. But it's not about the cause. It's about a compassion and acting on that compassion. And again, it's not, Lord, about their response. It's about our response and trying to make things right with others. And what a great season and time of the year to make that effort. So, Lord, start with me. Help me to see. Open my eyes. And then to feel. And then to do what I can do in the moment to help. And to do it cheerfully. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Here's a couple of questions at the table. Share a time when you experienced God's mercy. Only one, there are a lot. Share a time when somebody showed you mercy that was really undeserved. And then how might you practice mercy this week in one of those 7 ways? Okay? All right. Have a good discussion.